Are we shaped completely by our families, or can we free ourselves to pursue our own paths? It's a question for all of us, but add mental illness to the picture, and it becomes an ever more complex matter. Writer Daphne Merkin has spent much of her writing life documenting her struggle with depression, sometimes with shocking frankness. She considers the question of nature, nurture, and destiny in her new memoir, This Close to Happy, A Reckoning with Depression. And it brings her back to our studio tonight. Thank you for joining us again, Daphne.
Welcome.
You've suffered from depression much of your life, and after many years of therapy and many, many pills, you write that what you're suffering from does not fit into a neat category. What would it mean for depression to do so?
Well, there's something called intractable or untreatable depression, which is depression that doesn't fit into a category, mainly meaning it doesn't respond when depression responds in a particular way to medication. It's considered one thing. In my case, I didn't respond to a lot of medication. The depression returned, even on medication. So I think in some ways it was seen as it's called atypical depression. But a lot of people have atypical depression because these categories are in themselves not very clear. They're amorphous. Depression isn't so understood. All that.
And then I'm thinking too with the medication, it's not one shoe fits all. It's not one size fits all. You have to try different.
No, it's in fact and remains to this day a form of guessing game. There are some, 40 odd antidepressants, 30 something. It's a certain amount of hunch, intuition, trying.
And I'm thinking too, when you do go on medication, it's maybe like a lifeline, like, oh, maybe this is going to work. But then when it doesn't work, how does that feel? It must feel like a letdown.
A big letdown, yeah. And then there's also the issue of side effects that some of the medications have. I sort of late in the, I talk in the book about I was put on Prozac before Prozac was approved. And I was put on so much of it that I ended up with this frozen sphincter. They didn't use this much Prozac later on. I couldn't urinate on my own. I had to have a catheter put in by me.
But you were that desperate to try something that hadn't been approved yet.
Or the doctor treating me was, yeah. I guess they had high hopes for Prozac, correctly.
You grew up under emotionally very painful circumstances, and you wonder in your book whether or not your depression is a result of your genetics or your upbringing. Why is that important to you, to figure out what the cause is?
Because I think the whole nature-nurture debate is one that someone once said to me, the focus on it is in a certain way about where do you assign blame. Do you assign it to your upbringing, your genes? In truth, it's not that simple, which is why I think I keep coming back to it. Nurture at some point segues into nature, meaning, as they've now been researching, if you're exposed to a lot of stress, a trauma as a child, your brain changes. Your brain chemistry. So in the end, it's sort of immaterial if it was the environment or your parents. In my case, I found my parents fairly unbearable. So it was important to me. I kept thinking, would I be depressed? Was I treating a bad childhood? It was that kind of thing.
Well, your mother was pretty honest about mental health history in your dad's side of the family.
Right.
But she didn't.
Covered.
She covered up her side of the family. Would it have helped if she had been more honest to talk about her side of the family as well?
I think so. I think I would have had some sense that there was, but the truth of the matter is every family, if you look hard enough, somewhere there's an uncle and aunt who's either melancholic or depressed or even schizophrenic. I mean, mental illness is not foreign to most families, some aspect of it. It would have been more honest. It was always put so much on my father's family, particular two nieces of his, one of whom stayed with us a lot, who was not well. I don't know exactly what her diagnosis was, maybe schizophrenia. And she always would say, you know, this is where she'd sort of use this cousin as a cautionary tale. You will end up like this cousin. When in truth, her own brother suffered from depression. He died young, but
Did you blame yourself for being depressed?
yes, I think it comes with the illness. I think there's a degree of shame, stigma. Depression is, in some strange way, because depression isn't strange, the way I quote someone in the book, she's actually Diane Keaton, the actress, saying to me, everyone's a little depressed. You would never say everyone's a little schizophrenic. Depression is hard, it's hard to separate severe clinical medical depression from the ordinary blues.
Do you think that society kind of makes too light of it? Because people say, I'm so depressed today.
Yes, I think the word is so elasticized. As you say, people say, I'm so depressed when they've had a bad day.
Or if their team loses.
Right, right.
Yeah. How do you imagine that the course of illness would have unfolded differently if the public was more understanding or empathetic towards people with depression?
I think people would be less hidden about it. I think it remains closeted in many, many ways. And then you first hear of it when either someone commits suicide.
And then that's too late.
And that's too late. Like in New York, two people committed in fairly public, you know, they were in the public eye. A Wall Street guy committed suicide, and who was well known, I think named Charles Murphy. And when I read the coverage of him, you know, sure enough, he'd started becoming depressed. And I thought, how much was that? And he did go to a psychiatrist. And then a judge, a black judge, woman judge, was found in the river, in the Hudson River, I think, or the East River. And her brother had committed suicide and she had been depressed. I kept thinking, why? Could they have come out with it more? Would they have been helped more?
With all the stigma that's still now around depression, where do you think that you found the strength to talk about it in such a public way?
For me, I have written a lot of personal pieces for the New Yorker and for the Times. For me, it was a way to help myself and help others. There was a side of me that looked on and thought, why is this not talked about more? Why is everyone talking about their addictions and recovery are much more easily spoken about in the culture, and somehow depression is cast into the shadows, when in fact it's very common and
life-threatening.
And life-threatening, right.
You write of PET scans that will, in the future, will be able to diagnose if a patient might be better helped through talk therapy or drugs. Which result would you prefer for yourself?
At the moment, I think, for me, the combination is the best. is talk therapy and medication. I mean, ideally, I probably would say I would love to go off medication. But that's a little like saying I don't want to take something for diabetes. I mean, I've seen what happens when I go off and I get suicidal.
So even to yourself, you have to treat the illness seriously.
Very true. I have to tell myself, you know what, this isn't a figment of my imagination. It's real, it's serious. Yeah, I do have to go through that same talk with myself.
And now you've found a combination of pills that works for you.
Yes.
In the book, you also write about electroconvulsive therapy, which you were very reluctant to get. It's worked in the past for so many people. Why were you reluctant to get it, even though it was suggested that you do?
Yeah. It comes with memory loss. There are no two ways about it. I mean, they've refined it. They now do it unilaterally on one side of the one side of the brain and not both sides of the brain. But it comes with a certain amount of memory loss, dislocation. As a writer, I did not want the memory loss.
Not ever did you ever think maybe it might be,
Yes.
considering the life that you had, to forget and also possibly feel better?
But you don't have the choice of what you forget.
Right.
It's not like I would forget every bad experience and come out just remembering the good. I thought, what if I have a fairly strong memory and I use it when I write. So I had this feeling like, what if I won't be able to remember where I read these tiny, obsessional details. Also, a psychiatrist said to me, a psychopharmacologist, when I quizzed him about electroconvulsive shock therapy, said to me, well, it's it's the best thing we have for intractable, untreatable depression, but it's like taking a hammer to the brain. And I thought, interesting. I mean, it's not the most refined treatment.
You write of yourself as having a documentarian's curiosity about your childhood. You write, as though I might unearth some crucial piece of evidence. Some say this is the premise and promise of psychoanalysis.
Right.
Do you believe that digging for repressed memories is grounds for a cure?
I'm not sure I think that I would call them what I am digging for are repressed. Oh, yeah. Repressed memory, though, sounds like that whole syndrome. For memories that you have shunted aside or would prefer. I think some of the cure, if it's a cure, is in dealing with what you don't want to look at. So in that sense, yes, repressed. Also dealing with things about yourself you don't want to look at, not just your background, your parents, your siblings, but things about yourself you're not comfortable with.
What are you not comfortable with?
Many things. I think I have a tendency to be envious of other people.
What do you envy?
Too quickly. I either think, oh, they were well-loved. I'm always looking around and thinking, oh, that person acts well-loved, whatever I mean by that. My daughter always says to me, oh, you're always looking for people who are well-loved. I think I'm envious of people who seem very at ease in their own skins.
But don't you think people are just putting up a front?
Some. I think some people are putting up a front, but I think there are people who are. I know I profiled someone, a fashion designer of renown, and I said to her, do you ever worry? And the envy thing goes two ways. I said to her, do you ever worry about people who envy your success? I mean, that's a way of inhibiting one's own success. And she said, no, she just doesn't think about them. And I thought, and then later we were talking about her childhood, and she had the most nurturing parents. So I thought it produces less conflict. I think one thing that difficulties growing up produce, everyone has conflicts, but they can produce really inhibiting conflicts.
But I also think that when you do have those challenges at a young age or at any time, you learn how to cope with certain things.
True. I agree.
You write, Puritan heritage and pill-happy moment leads to the condition being both underdiagnosed and over-medicalized. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, I think what I meant by that is certainly, I don't know here, but certainly in America, a lot of people's first dealings with their own depression is they go to a GP, a general internist, who says, take this pill and you will be better. And they go home and take pills and never discuss the depression. And depression is also brought about by emotional factors. So, I mean, on one way, it's treated like the measles, but it's more complicated than the measles. You don't have to discuss why you feel sad about having lost out at something when you have the measles. So in one way, it's treated like a sheer medical thing. And in the other sense, it's not picked up at all, as we were discussing earlier. And you first hear about it when
It's too late.
it's too late.
You're right. Would I be any less depressed had I stuck to the rules of my faith? You've asked the question without answering it in the book. Do you think you'd be better off following rules?
No. I feel not following rules comes with a price. In my case, I was talking specifically about this observant Orthodox, and I kept thinking, you know, maybe you would not have gotten depressed if you had lived a little more, stuck to this and stayed in a community instead of sort of being on my own.
Why did you leave?
For me, it was confining, very confining. I did not particularly, not that I think you have to, I didn't particularly believe in a God behind the rituals. I think I felt on top of my Germanic, rule-ridden family life, it was too much.
Leonard Cohen became a Buddhist monk,
Right,
in part to control his depression.
right.
What is it about order and boundaries that could prove itself beneficial to dealing with depression? You kind of got that when you were in the hospitals, right?
True, true. I think it contains one's inner life a little bit. I mean, depression is, in the end, something you feel. I think the order helps you feel part of something larger than yourself. And in some way, the depression can then take a back step.
But didn't you get that in your faith?
No, it didn't help. It's not a particularly the way I mean, Orthodox Judaism is not Buddhism. It's not particularly meditative. You keep a lot of rules, you know, with food and with Saturday, Shabbos. For me, it didn't keep it at bay. But I think it was a lot because all that orthodoxy was taking place within my family. It wasn't presented particularly spiritually.
And you spoke to your mother about wanting to commit suicide. What did she say that meant for the faith?
Nothing. She didn't bring up, in fact, I talk about, is it against, she didn't say, oh, you won't get a burial in, no. I knew that it was against the Jewish faith in a literal way, but they make all these exceptions for suicide so that they can be buried with other people. My mother's main response to me was to wait.
For?
She said, wait another 10 years. Or when I had my daughter, she would say to me, wait till Zoe is 20.
And she doesn't need you anymore,
Right.
assuming.
Assuming
Right.
that she'd be fine if I offed myself when she was 20. Yeah.
Mary McCarthy, a well-known book
Yes.
critic, reviewed your novel Enchantment, and she said this about you. She wrote that the author was lacking in shame or modesty, and she also wrote about your book. The book fascinates one by its openness, which repels at the same time. Do you know where you get this shocking honesty from?
I think it was a survival mechanism. I felt like everything that went on in my family, as is true of all families, is secret. And no one knows about it. And I never liked secrets. I thought secrets are work for the powerful. There's always someone weak who doesn't get the benefit of a secret.
Where did you learn that from?
I don't know if it's something I just thought about as I looked on. And many, many years later, when I was writing a piece, I thought of Esquire magazine once had an anthology of writing called All Our Secrets Are the Same. And I always thought of that. I thought it would be such relief to know someone else's secrets. And it felt like a relief. And also, if I told my secrets in a way that other people could relate to.
But what did your family think about airing their secrets?
Or dirty laundry, as we call it. To be fair to my mother, who wrote herself, she admired my writing. I don't know, in the end, she said once, I remember I once was saying something to her about the family, and she said, "Oh, you wrote it all in Enchantment." That was the name of that novel. You don't have to repeat it. I think she accepted it up to a point. She once, when I wrote for The New Yorker, where I wrote pieces about erotic life, I'm not sure she read those.
Spanking
Yes.
a novel, a romance, was it?
A romance, right. Could have been a novel. She once asked me to change a detail about my father in a piece about money. He had died while they were waiting to publish the piece.
What was the detail that she wanted
I
changed?
said he had a crocodile smile. She didn't want that in. My father, my senses didn't read him a lot of it. The more, quote, confessional pieces. But basically, my mother accepted it. I think there was a certain deal that we made.
What about your siblings?
Mixed. I think they have mixed feelings.
Your daughter, you wrote, doesn't read what you write. Is that her decision?
Yes.
Would you like her to read the things that you've written?
She's read a few, like I wrote a profile of Madonna, and she was interested enough in Madonna to read that profile. And she's read one or two others. No, I think it's her right not to read. I think I understand it. I mean, the stuff is fairly personal. Maybe she figures she knows it all already. She lives with me.
How do your 5 siblings deal with what you've made public about your life?
Mostly they don't talk about it. I think one of my sisters who lives in Israel said to me she was very proud, for instance, of this book. One sister, I think, doesn't like it at all.
And your brothers?
And my brothers,
Are you in touch with any of them?
yes. One brother said, "Why didn't you put this and this about me in the book?" There was some crucial detail he wanted me to include. Another brother said it wouldn't have been his view, but it was my view.
So
Yeah.
he respected that.
Yeah.
Do you find that as you've gotten older, you've become closer with your siblings? Or is there still that feeling of loneliness?
Some of them I've become closer to. But I wouldn't say we're
The Brady Bunch?
the Brady Bunch. No.
Leonard Cohen sang, "There is no cure for love." You riff on this and you say there is no cure for life. Is it easier to deal with depression by accepting it rather than hoping for a cure?
Yes. I think hoping for a cure is ultimately self-defeating, because I don't think there is a cure for depression. I mean, a once and for all cure. I think you can keep it at bay. I think there are rare people who have it once and it goes away. But if you're someone who is inclined to get depression, I don't think it's ever completely out of the picture.
Looking at the book, 15 years, in your most private moments, how do you feel about accomplishing this?
Close to happy.
Daphne, it's been such a pleasure meeting you, and this book is fantastic.
Thank you
Congratulations.
so much. Thank you.
And thank you for writing it.
Thank you.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.